when you're suffering with a mental health issue, a mental illness, you already think that you are a burden. And I'm not saying that I started the year off being like, yay, so happy, this is going to be a great year. Because I started the year off with depression and very bad anxiety. And, and I had been suffering with that for a couple of years, really, prior to that. But part of the reason of leaving that job was because I needed to focus on my mental health more and felt like I could no longer do that in the job that I was in. And so it was really about, I started the year with focusing on mental health and it being something that I needed to prioritize. And I guess, so being from that to then going into, now COVID has happened.
Yeah, so tell me about that. So the job that you had, the Sunpac job, monster job, massive job, that obviously affected you across some of that.
Yep.
So you've left there to recoup and recalibrate.
Yeah.
So beginning of the year, tougher than I realised. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing that you're comfortable enough to share that, which is great.
Absolutely.
So that was the state of mind that you were in at the beginning of the year, and then COVID.
Yeah.
So how did that impact where you were at with all of that?
I guess I'm grateful at the fact that it didn't hit in January because, mostly because I was able to have probably like a month and a half before COVID actually happened from the time that I'd left my job, that I had the sort of resting sort of period. But when COVID happened and I realised that I was no longer going to be able to find a job, it was a big blow because I had been in a position that was of probably importance in the industry, I guess, but was also a job that I loved that job and I loved doing what I was doing, but it just wasn't sustainable for me anymore. And making that decision to leave and then making the decision to pull myself out of how I felt about COVID, because I changed my mindset to be, well, there's nothing I can do about this. But the only thing that I do have control over right now is myself. So I just focused inward, not in a selfish way, but in a way of like, well, what can I do then to keep myself going and sustain myself, and where can I find more money? Because I was just like, there has to be a way. Like, there just has to. I just had to kind of change my mindset. But I will acknowledge that you can still feel shit and make those decisions, because in no way did I just wake up one day and it was all better. It definitely was not like that. It was just one step at a time for me.
I don't acknowledge in any way. I don't know how to phrase this. I don't think that I've ever been in a situation where I've been what I would call depressed like that. I probably have. I might have. I don't know, but not consciously being able to flag it as that's my state of mind. There's a lot of people out there that, and particularly in the arts, particularly this year, that do struggle with that. You know, I know I've a lot of actor friends who have anxiety that struggle with this kind of situation in their lives. So for someone like yourself that you've got that, you were dealing with that, how did you kind of change that mindset?
Yeah, so, and this is my own personal experience, because I know that everybody has a different experience to it. I had wonderful family support. I had a great amount of friends around me, and probably have become even better friends with those people even through this experience. And I had a fabulous doctor. Thankfully, for me, for my journey, it was to start on medication, and the medication really helped me because of the state that I was in. I needed that medication to be able to pull me back up. And I saw it as a way of, if I'm sick, I'm going to take medication to get better. For me, that's how I viewed this situation.
So you were able to see it as something that was like a sickness?
Yes, eventually. In the beginning, was figuring out what it was because I'd never experienced depression before.
So what were the effects of it that kind of flagged for you as something that you needed to take note of?
People around me had mentioned things very cleverly, like they weren't being hurtful about it, but they had mentioned things to me, which was then makes you think, oh, maybe that isn't quite not normal behavior, but maybe that's a concerning behavior. One big thing for me was I just remember being so tired, like
Right.
I remember getting up and going to work, and it's actually amazing when I think about it that I could still go to work because I don't know what drove me to do that, but it just did. Was waking up in the morning, not being able to get out of bed. Like, I totally understand now when people say they have depression, they can't get out of bed. It is legit real. And then going to work and just being a completely different person. So the person I was at home to the person I was at work were two different people.
In what way?
Because I was suffering with depression, I would be a bubbly, exciting,
So you overcompensated for it at work.
Yeah, person at work. So whenever I was around people, you had no idea. And then when I was at home, the first thing I'd do when I get home was hop into bed.
Wow.
Because I was exhausted.
Well, exhausted from maintaining that all day as well, I would imagine.
Plus the stress of the environment that I was working in, plus the fact that I had depression.
Yeah.
So it was suppressing.
Which adds to the stress of the job and...
Yeah, it's all compounds.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, that was one big thing that I remember because that was significant. And, you know, it's not so much about, like, crying every day. That's not really... For me, that wasn't it. I mean, obviously, there were moments. During that time that I was suffering with depression, I had 2 family members pass away.
Oh.
So one who had a brain aneurysm, and then 2 months later, my uncle had serious mental health issues and committed suicide. So that moment for me, realizing what he did and what my family went through, was quite an eye-opener for me, because I realized I had been at a state at one point in time where I had considered that as a way out. And I remember seeing what had happened to him and my family and being like, I'm so glad I didn't do that. Like, seeing the repercussions of it at the time when you're going through it, it just seems like a normal thing to do.
Right.
Like, it doesn't even faze you. You just think, well, that's just legitimately the way that I should get out of this situation.
It's just a simple solution.
Like, it's so amazing. Like, we don't understand enough about our brains, I don't think. But it's like, when I have eventually talked to my family about it, they were like, my mum was so shocked that it was that simple, the way that I was thinking of it. That experience of what my uncle did really did open up my eyes to what suicide actually is. But I'm so grateful that I was able to get the support that I needed, because I know there are people out there who do suffer and don't have that support. And thank God for our Australian medical system where we can get the help that we need. But yeah, really going through that process of having that support, like, I never would have imagined that being in that moment where I was, I never imagined that I would be where I am now. And I'm so grateful that I pushed through out of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway. And I know that people who, when you're suffering with depression, you hear other people say that, and they say, you just got to get through it. You think, oh, that's never going to happen. But I honestly can say that it will get better. Like, it does get better. Like, it's so hard at the time and you're so pushing through, and every day is a battle. But honestly, when I just think about that and now, it's night and day.
How much of your ability to push through that do you attribute to having people that you could talk to about where you were at?
Well, I have to admit, in the beginning, I didn't talk to anyone about it.
Okay.
Because I'm the sort of person who, I'm all about other people.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm very much a people person, and I'm compassionate to other people, and myself often comes second, which
Yeah, and that's, I think, particularly common for a lot of us in this industry.
definitely, because we often are. That's the nature of our industry and our work is people.
Yeah.
So putting yourself first isn't a natural thing.
No.
So being able to open up and talk to people, although, yeah, that was something that I had to just learn to do. I was grateful that I had someone close to me at the time say, I really think that this is who did see me when I wasn't at work, could say to me, I think that it would really help you if you just went and spoke to somebody.
Yeah.
And it was when I spoke to a professional that I realised what I was. It opened my eyes up to see actually what I was going through.
Wow.
And then from that, I could then talk to friends. And my doctor actually really encouraged me to seek support from friends, which I never would have done. And it took me a fair bit of time to even talk to my family about it, because there was so much shame attached with mental health. So much shame. Like, you think that you did it to yourself, and you think that you're the one who came up with this idea, like you're the one who created this awful life for you. So in that way, it was a process of undoing that mindset.
And knowing the service mindset that you're talking about, that a lot of us in this industry have, I'm guessing, because I'm not in the situation, but I'm guessing there's also a reluctance to talk about it because of that sense of, I'm going to burden somebody else with this as well. Yeah. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're suffering with a mental health issue, a mental illness, you already think that you are a burden. As part of the illness, you think, and it's awful to hear, but it's reality when you're going through it. You think you're a burden to the world or the people around you, and why would you tell them this when they're having such a great time in their own life? This is just going to bring a downer to the whole situation. Maybe they won't be friends with me, and then I'll lose something else.
Yeah.
It's amazing what your mind does when you're in that time, because things that you never would have considered or just start to come to the front of mind.
So do you think that being able to turn that, how much of that was kind of started because you had someone who actually said something to you? Do you think that would have, like, if they hadn't have come to you and said, hey, I really think you need to have a chat with someone, if that hadn't have happened, do you think you would have just kept going down that road? Or do you think... I mean, it's probably hard to work.
It is hard to know. Obviously hard to know, but I do believe that I would have, that I still would have ended up on this path that I'm on now. Because, honestly, like, I guess... because my family live away, they live in Bargara and Bundaberg, so I don't see them all the time. They would have noticed if I had have been around them all the time. I think I had another friend who started to make remarks to me, like kept checking in on me when I was going through it. And I think if the other person had have said something, they would have. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for those people who are in my life at that point in time. So I was surrounded by community really during that time, and that's what it comes down to. I mean, a lot of the time we see a lot of cultural groups who, and I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but there are often a lot of times in cultural groups where mental illness is not as apparent because they have those networks that are already established. And I think that's something that's really important in the arts industry, is that we value each other and we value the community that we have. It's hard sometimes because we have that tall poppy syndrome, and so, we're often fighting for the same sort of work and that sort of thing, but when it really comes down to the grassroots of it all, like I said before about the venue existing over revenue, the whole reason why we are in this industry and the whole reason why we exist is to create and to bring something to our communities and to the people around us.
Yep.